top of the coffee.
I stood in my father's empty bedroom 3 days after his funeral, holding a copy of his will that my lawyer had just walked me through. The house was silent except for the sound of my sister's SUV pulling into the driveway. She'd texted me to meet her here. She wanted to discuss next steps. I had no idea I was about to discover that the person I'd trusted most had spent the last 6 months of our father's life systematically stealing my entire inheritance. My name is Rebecca, and I'm 37 years old. I grew up in the house I was standing in that day, a beautiful craftsman-style home in Portland that my parents bought in 1982 for $70,000. It's worth $2.3 million now. My sister Melissa is 4 years older than me, and growing up, we were inseparable. She was my protector, my confidant, the person who taught me how to do my makeup and drove me to my first concert. When our mother died of breast cancer 9 years ago, Melissa and I held each other at the funeral and promised we'd always be there for each other. That we were all each other had left. Dad never remarried. He poured himself into his woodworking business and his garden, and both Melissa and I called him every week and visited for holidays. We had our own lives. I'm a teacher, married to my husband Jason, with 2 kids. Melissa worked in pharmaceutical sales, divorced, no children. She always said she was married to her career. Dad seemed proud of both of us. He told me once, after a few glasses of wine at Christmas, that he'd made sure everything would be split equally between us when he was gone. "You girls are everything to me," he said. "I'd never play favorites." Last March, Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 6 to 9 months. I'll never forget the phone call. I was in my classroom setting up for the day when Melissa called, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. I drove straight to the hospital. When I got there, Melissa was already in Dad's room, holding his hand. We cried together. We made plans together. We promised Dad we'd take care of everything. That's when Melissa suggested she move into Dad's house to take care of him full-time. "You've got the kids and your teaching job," she said. "My job is flexible. I can work remotely. It makes sense." I hugged her, grateful. I visited 3 times a week after work, brought the kids on weekends. But Melissa was there every day, cooking his meals, managing his medications, driving him to appointments. I thought she was being the most selfless, loving daughter in the world. There were little things I noticed, but dismissed. Dad seemed more tired when I visited, less talkative. A few times he looked at me strangely, like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Once, in late July, I arrived to find Melissa and a man in a suit leaving Dad's bedroom. "Oh, that's just Dad's financial advisor," Melissa said quickly. "We're making sure all his accounts are in order. You know how he is with paperwork." I didn't think anything of it. By August, Dad was sleeping most of the time. The cancer was winning. He died on September 14th, with both of us holding his hands. Melissa and I planned the funeral together. We went through his clothes together, crying over his favorite flannel shirts. She seemed genuinely devastated. I never suspected a thing. The will reading was scheduled for a week after the funeral. I expected it to be simple. Dad had always said everything would be split 50-50. The house would probably be sold. We'd each get half. Maybe some of Mom's jewelry would go to me, Dad's tools to Melissa. Simple. Fair. My lawyer, David Chen, called me the day before the official reading. "Rebecca, I need you to come to my office, alone, before tomorrow." Something in his voice made my stomach drop. I sat in his office an hour later while he slid a document across his desk. "Your father changed his will on July 23rd. I need you to read this before tomorrow." I read it 3 times before the words made sense. The house, all $2.3 million of it, went entirely to Melissa. All of Dad's savings accounts, his investment portfolio, everything, to Melissa. I got $5,000 and Mom's wedding ring. That was it. "There's more," David said quietly. He showed me another document, a letter my father had allegedly written, explaining that I had pulled away from the family, that I clearly didn't need the money because I had Jason's income, and that Melissa had sacrificed everything to care for him. None of it sounded like my father, but there was his signature at the bottom. I couldn't breathe. I called Jason from the parking lot, barely able to speak. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about all those months Melissa had Dad alone. The financial advisor. The way Dad had looked at me, like he wanted to say something. The pieces started falling into place, and I felt sick. The next morning, at the official will reading, Melissa played her part perfectly. She cried. She hugged me. "I'm so sorry, Becca," she whispered. "I had no idea he'd do this. We can figure something out. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Her performance was Oscar-worthy. I said nothing. I just nodded and left. For 2 weeks, I was numb. I cried constantly. Jason was furious, wanted to contest the will immediately, but David explained that Oregon law makes it nearly impossible to overturn a will unless you can prove coercion or that the person wasn't of sound mind. And Melissa had been smart. There were medical records showing Dad had been lucid when he signed. She'd thought of everything. But Melissa made one mistake. She got greedy, and she got cocky. 3 weeks after the funeral, she posted a photo on Facebook. She was standing in Dad's kitchen, her kitchen now, holding a glass of champagne. Caption reading, "New beginnings in my beautiful new home. Dad would be so proud." I stared at that photo for an hour. That's when something inside me shifted. The grief turned to rage, and the rage turned into clarity. I called Dad's hospice nurse, Angela, who'd been with him during his final months. We met for coffee. "Angela," I said, "I need you to tell me the truth. Was my father really lucid in July? Could he have understood what he was signing?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Your father was on some pretty heavy pain medication by then. There were days he didn't know what month it was. But Rebecca, I can't get involved in family disputes." I pressed. "Was Melissa ever alone with him when important documents were around?" Angela looked at her coffee. "There was one day in late July. A man came with papers. Your sister sent me to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription that, honestly, wasn't urgent. When I got back 2 hours later, your father was exhausted and confused. He asked me who that man was, said he didn't remember anyone visiting. That was enough. I hired a private investigator named Marcus. I gave him 2 weeks and $5,000, almost all the inheritance I'd received. Marcus found things even I hadn't imagined. Melissa had taken out a home equity line of credit against her condo 2 years ago and was drowning in debt. She'd been passed over for a promotion 3 times. Her pharmaceutical sales job was actually in jeopardy. She needed money desperately. But the real evidence came from Dad's neighbor, Helen, who was 81 and sharp as a tack. She told Marcus she'd seen Melissa and the man in the suit visiting multiple times when I wasn't there. Once, she'd heard them through an open window. "We need to move quickly," Melissa had said. "Before Rebecca starts asking questions, he'll sign anything right now if we say it's for his medical care." Marcus recorded his interview with Helen. We gathered medical records showing Dad's cognitive decline. We found the financial advisor, who turned out to be a lawyer who specialized in estate planning, and discovered he'd been hired by Melissa, not by Dad. 4 months after Dad's death, I filed to contest the will. Melissa was blindsided. She called me screaming. "How could you do this after everything I did for Dad? You're just greedy." I let her rage. Then I said quietly, "I have Helen's testimony. I have Angela's statement. I have Dad's medical records. I have proof you hired that lawyer. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" The line went silent. The case took 8 months. Melissa fought hard, hired an expensive attorney, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge ruled that Dad had been unduly influenced and not of sound mind when he signed the new will. The original will, the one splitting everything equally, was reinstated. Melissa was ordered to sell the house. Half the proceeds came to me. After legal fees, I walked away with just over $1 million. But the money wasn't the victory that mattered most. What mattered was that Melissa's friends and extended family all learned what she'd done. Her reputation was destroyed. Her social media, once full of life updates and champagne toasts, went silent. I heard from a cousin that she moved to Arizona to start fresh. I used some of my inheritance to set up college funds for my kids. Jason and I paid off our mortgage. I donated $50,000 to the hospice where Dad spent his final days in Angela's name. And I planted a garden. A beautiful sprawling garden with all of Dad's favorite flowers in our backyard. Every time I'm out there, I think about him and the lessons he actually taught me. Integrity, honesty, fighting for what's right. The betrayal still hurts. I don't think that ever fully goes away. Melissa and I will never speak again. But I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are capable of breathtaking cruelty. And I learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew. I fought for my father's true wishes. I fought for justice, and I won. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever felt powerless in the face of injustice, please know this. You are not alone, and you are not helpless. Sometimes the fight is long and painful, but truth has a way of rising to the surface. Don't ever let anyone convince you that you deserve less than what's rightfully yours. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments if you've ever dealt with family betrayal. Your stories matter, and this community is here for you. Thank you for listening.